pair of sisters, one older, one younger. The older sister actually knew all the answers to every test but deliberately got one question wrong so that her younger sister would score higher. Their father was extremely cruel and had set a harsh rule. The child with the higher score had to beat the one with the lower score. One day, the older sister overheard her parents having a heated argument. Worried that her younger sister would hear their harsh words and be hurt, she quickly covered her sister's ears. What she didn't expect was that her parents were actually discussing divorce, both fighting to take custody of the intelligent and gifted younger daughter. Neither was willing to let go of the trophy on the table, and in the struggle, it fell straight onto the older sister's foot. Blood immediately seeped through her white socks. But she knew that if she made a sound because of the pain, her father would hear and it would only cause more trouble. So, she endured the agony and pretended nothing had happened. From that moment on, the young older sister realized that only by taking care of her younger sister could she keep the family together and avoid being abandoned by their parents. As time passed, the two sisters grew up. The younger sister inexplicably started avoiding the older one. A strong sense of crisis surged within the older sister. After thinking it over, she came up with a heartbreaking solution. She prayed to the heavens to fall seriously ill. In her innocent mind, she believed that only if she were gravely ill would her parents and sister truly care about her. Fate seemed to mock her. After her prayer, she was indeed diagnosed with an illness. But after further tests, it turned out to be an unexplained sleep disorder, one that even doctors couldn't pinpoint the cause of. Their father, who valued academic performance above all else, was completely disappointed upon hearing the news. To avoid being further despised by her father, the older sister carefully hid her sleep disorder from him, trying to prove she was still useful, still valuable. But her father remained cold and indifferent, even saying, "Since there's no cause for your illness, you should study even harder." He was convinced that as long as the older sister improved her math scores, she could still rank first in her grade, and under no circumstances could her younger sister surpass her. These pressures weighed on her like a massive stone, keeping her in constant fear and extreme stress. She even began to hallucinate, always feeling as if her father was standing behind her, watching her with a harsh gaze. Her strange behavior caught the attention of her subject teacher, who called her into the office and gently asked why she always seemed distracted in class. Not wanting to discuss the topic, she quickly made up an excuse, took the teacher's treasured university badge. That night, anxious over getting a question wrong on a test, she desperately swallowed a handful of sleeping pills. Perhaps it was the medication, or perhaps the overwhelming stress of the upcoming exams, but she couldn't sleep at all. After hours of torment, she made a reckless decision. Under the cover of a heavy downpour, taking advantage of the school patrols being more relaxed, she sneaked into the school alone, planning to steal the math test answers. But just as she was about to succeed, the subject teacher suddenly arrived for a routine check and caught her red-handed. Terrified, she immediately dropped to her knees, crying and begging the teacher not to tell her father. She was so desperate that she even said she had no other way out but death. Seeing her pitiful state, the teacher helped her onto the sofa, assuring her that they understood her character and didn't believe she would deliberately break the rules. Perhaps it was because no one had ever shown her kindness for so long, or perhaps because she had lacked her father's love since childhood and was starving for warmth, but in that moment, she suddenly hugged the teacher's neck and pinned them onto the sofa. During their struggle, they accidentally triggered the smartwatch on the teacher's wrist, and its recording function started. Even though she realized this, she was so desperate to obtain the test answers and prove herself to her father that she went through with something she shouldn't have. Later, G discovered the recording and accused her sister, shouting that it was their father who had committed the crime. Panicked, the younger sister rushed to snatch the phone back, leading to a struggle that ended with the phone falling out of the window. One of them ran toward the stairs, while the other, in a moment of reckless desperation, jumped straight out of the window. As one frantically searched for the phone, they were spotted by the school's security patrol. The bright flashlight beams triggered hallucinations, making them believe they were being haunted by a ghost. Terrified, they fled in another direction. Meanwhile, So-hyun was attacked by someone mentally unstable. After some simple first aid, they were taken to a private hospital. At the same time, G-else found the phone. Suddenly, the school's announcement system broadcasted a message. The school event has ended. All students must return to their classrooms immediately. Shortly after, the school gates were locked. No one was allowed to enter or leave. It was obvious that the school wanted to cover up the incident. The murder weapon had been taken by someone with short hair. When injured So-hyun was sent to Jae's father hospital, Ji, filled with rage, climbed over the fence and stormed into the operating room. After all, the older sister had once said, "Father killed the teacher, right?" Unexpectedly, the father, upon seeing his daughter, asked her to suture the student's wound, saying it was a rare practice opportunity. As he spoke, he reminisced about his medical school days, mentioning that first-year students could only practice on pigskin, thick, tough, and frustrating to work with. But in the second year, things changed. There were donated cadavers available for practice. He would never forget the first time he stitched human flesh. The texture was soft yet elastic. After some time, So-hyun regained consciousness. When she went downstairs for some fresh air, she suddenly saw someone directing a group of people to move a large burlap sack. Curious, So-hyun secretly followed. Just then, her phone rang. It was a senior calling. "Have you been in contact with Jae?" She noticed large burlap sack, and when she entered inside, she finds dead body. But before she could respond, the father suddenly snatched the phone away and asked if she wanted to study medicine. So-hyun wanted to leave as soon as possible, but the father blocked her way. Casually, he remarked that the bodies being transported to this room were unidentified, abandoned corpses, no family members to claim them, no one to look for them. To perfect his surgical skills, he practiced on them daily. As he spoke, he suddenly pulled back the sheet covering a corpse. Notably, the deceased wasn't left there randomly. It was Jae who, along with So-hyun, had been drugged with a sedative. The father coldly reminded, "If you want to get into medical school, you can't be afraid of blood, that is, if they could even pass the entrance exams." With that, he pressed a button near the door, finally allowing So-hyun to escape unscathed. Early the next morning, after a video of a knife attack leaked, the police arrived at the school to investigate. However, under a warning glance from the principal, the truth was twisted. The mentally unstable person involved in the case was painted as a jealous, deranged individual who had attacked So-hyun out of resentment. To make matters worse, the mentally unstable person suddenly changed their statement, falsely claiming that So-hyun had given them various pills and promised that taking them would make them feel better. At this point, the wounded So-hyun became the suspect. They desperately tried to explain, but the police produced damning evidence. Surveillance footage from the hospital's pharmacy showing So-hyun standing at the door on the day of their medical examination. At that moment, So-hyun realized it had all been a setup. Ji had orchestrated everything from the beginning. So-hyun finally exposed the real culprit. Soon, news of So-hyun's confession reached the class. However, Ji remained completely unfazed. Surprisingly, it was the gang leader in charge of street deals who planned it. He knew he didn't have Jae's background and connections. If the police really dug into this, he'd be doomed. So that night, he made a move. He tracked down So-hyun. They forced her to return the stolen drug, threatening to expose her if she refused. As the top student at Saiwa Girls High School, she was brilliant at academics. With no other choice, So-hyun had to order a 30-day supply from Jae. The next day, the order was actually accepted. However, So-hyun wasn't sure if the person handling it was Jae or the gang leader in charge of street deals. After school, Jae discovered that all the drugs hidden in the lab were gone. She confronted the mentally unstable person and learned that, fearing police investigation, the gang leader had set a trap. He pretended to agree to sell the drugs to So-hyun but had already tipped off the police. If So-hyun went to the pickup location as planned, they would be caught red-handed. Realizing this, Ji immediately tried to warn So-hyun. But not only did So-hyun refuse to answer the phone, their location showed they were getting closer to the drop-off point. Thinking quickly, Ji tricked her older sister by claiming she needed to borrow phone. She then used the gang leader's phone to change So-hyun's pickup location. This successfully saved So-hyun but exposed her sister in the process. Ji's older sister, without her father's phone, was about to escape when several doctors forcibly pushed her into an ambulance. Their father followed closely behind. Their father had long known that her daughter was stealing and selling drugs to classmates. Now, he seized this opportunity to distance himself from the situation. Coincidentally, a photo of So-hyun wandering around was captured clearly. Along with other unfavorable circumstances, it was easy to blame everything on them. Thanks to his daughter, he could eliminate troublesome people. Years ago, Jae's older sister was terrified. This fear haunted her even during the college entrance exams, where her hands were stained with blood. Her older sister blamed her for failing the exam. No one knew how much she had sacrificed for their father's approval. Months earlier, Jae's older sister had successfully stolen the exam questions from So-hyun's father. Their father knew but did not punish her. Instead, he used this knowledge to blackmail So-hyun's father, who was responsible for setting the exam questions. They struck a deal. Jae's father would help locate his missing daughter, who had been gone for 13 years. In return, he would leak the answers on exam day. This was recorded in Jae's journal. However, part of the journal was torn out, and it was unclear who had removed it. Not long after, So-hyun's father boarded a bus to the exam question preparation site. At that moment, Jae's father sent a text. He had found his missing daughter. This strengthened So-hyun's father's resolve to leak the answers. He hid the answers in a capsule and swallowed it, pretending to be unwell so he would be sent to Jae's father hospital. The plan was to extract the capsule there, ensuring success. Although Jae's older was an exceptionally skilled surgeon, an accident occurred, and So-hyun's father died. But shockingly, the scene shifted to a grand funeral of Jae's older sister organized by Jae's parents. Jae refused to believe and went toward the morgue. So-hyun, noticing this, immediately followed. She revealed that the body wasn't So-hyun's father, it was her sister. They had lived in the same dormitory at the inn. So-hyun found it too much of a coincidence. Surprisingly, Jae listened to So-hyun's analysis and, despite knowing that everything was orchestrated by their father, still wanted to see how things would unfold. Letting him continue committing crimes would actually make it easier for the police to catch him. So, they decided to gather evidence of So-hyun's father's crimes. They split up. Jae sneaked into the surveillance room while So-hyun created a distraction. Meanwhile, So-hyun broke into Jae's father's office. The journal mentioned that when Jae copied the exam answers, Jae's father had walked in on her. This explained why she was afraid of her sister's dark pupils. Additionally, their father had mentioned a gift left by So-hyun's father, but he never specified where it was hidden. After searching for a while, So-hyun found a disc among the medical records. The cover of the disc was a CT scan of her father taken before he died. Holding the disc, So-hyun became overwhelmed with sorrow and rage. For a moment, she considered killing Jae's father. Luckily, her stepmother stopped her before she could act on her impulse. After the funeral, So-hyun consulted her mother about whether the disc could be used as evidence. However, under South Korean law, a CT scan alone couldn't directly prove that a surgical procedure caused the death. Her mother could only express regret. So-hyun's stepmother took out a blackmail letter and admitted that she had been receiving them continuously since the incident. She speculated that the sender must have known the truth from the very beginning. They decided to find this person and make them testify. As soon as the short-haired person heard this, they panicked. Just as they were about to stand up and explain, the mother beside them forcefully pulled them back into their seat. She then loudly questioned why, if the sender truly knew the truth, they hadn't written down the evidence in the letter. Unbeknownst to them, their entire conversation was secretly recorded by the long-haired person. That night, the long-haired person met with a senior contact and exchanged a USB drive for a large number of pills. Shortly after, the senior used the USB drive in another transaction with someone else. That someone else was none other than Jae's father. In reality, everything had been a trap set by So-hyun. So-hyun had predicted that the long-haired person wouldn't pass up the opportunity to make a profit, so during the day, she had deliberately leaked information to Jae. As expected, the long-haired person, after recording the conversation, sold the audio at a high price to Jae's father. Now, Jae's father, who had already gone so far as to fake his daughter's death to cover up his crimes, would definitely panic upon learning that new evidence had surfaced. Next, So-hyun needed Jae's help. So-hyun planned to make it seem like he was searching for the surgery footage inside the hospital and needed to ensure Jae's father noticed. If Jae's father had a guilty conscience, he would rush to clean up the evidence before anyone else could. Meanwhile, Ji installed listening devices all over their house. Meanwhile, Sol-ji waited anxiously outside Ji's mother's house for 3 hours. In contrast, Hui remained calm, as if nothing was amiss. At the same time, in the courtroom for Sol-ji's father's murder case, the short-haired woman called for a new witness, one who had been the sole observer of the surgical procedure. Surprisingly, his father showed no sign of concern upon hearing this and even reassured his lawyer that nothing unexpected would happen. In a twist, Hui's mother led 2 people to an unexpected location, a welfare home. The atmosphere was tense, as if something significant was about to unfold. While emotions ran high, Hui's mindset was shifting. Until this moment, Sol-ji had firmly believed in Goi, but her stepmother reminded her that Goi's father had appeared unerringly confident in court, as if he had already secured victory. His ability to counter every new piece of evidence with ease suggested he had long anticipated the accusations. Even upon hearing that Goi had been identified as a key witness, he seemed unfazed, reassuring his lawyer that there was no way she could testify. At this point, Sol-ji's inner convictions began to waver. Meanwhile, Hui's father took her to an undisclosed location. There, he handed his daughter a phone, playing a video that revealed surveillance footage of Sol-ji and her stepmother inside a car. The footage raised a critical question. If obtaining the exam questions was all that mattered, why had Goi's older sister been taken into the operating room in the first place? An unexpected crisis struck. The front left tire of Sol-ji's stepmother's car suddenly burst, narrowly avoiding a collision by swerving into another vehicle. The near accident sent a shock through Goi, who had been watching the scene unfold. Before she could even react, her father turned to her and asked a chilling question. "Do you want to know why your sister was in the operating room that day?" Ji's father took her to a secluded villa. Inside, locked away, was none other than Ji's older sister, the daughter he had gone to great lengths to fake the death of. Around Ji's older sister's ankle was an electronic tracking device. Thinking her sister was being held captive, Ji grabbed her hand and tried to run. But the moment they reached the door, a deafening alarm blared. Ji's older sister suddenly reacted violently, as if triggered by something deep within her mind. She screamed uncontrollably and ran back into the room, frantically resisting any attempt to take her away. Only then did Ji's father finally break his silence. The real murderer was not Ji, it was Ji's older sister. It turned out that Ji's older sister, combined with the long-term influence of Ji's father's strict education, once she obtained the exam questions, she believed she couldn't let her shameful secret be exposed. So, she injected a heart-paralyzing poison into the foredrip. By the time Ji's father arrived at the operating room, it was already too late. However, Ji refused to believe her father's words. Seeing through her hesitation, her father pointed out that she wasn't unwilling to believe him. He admitted that he no longer wanted to cover for his eldest daughter. But despite his failure as a father, he had tried his best. He didn't want to acknowledge his own mistakes. The next day, he didn't show up to school. So-hyun, worried, asked the teacher about her absence and learned that she had taken a leave due to illness. Concerned, she searched for her after school, revisiting all the places filled with their memories, but she was nowhere to be found. Finally, she remembered the tutoring room at the hospital where she used to study. Sure enough, she found her there. So-hyun stood at a distance, waiting for an explanation. But Ji seemed like a different person. She no longer wanted to be close to her. Only after his desperate pleas did she reluctantly agree to talk, finally revealing the truth. So-hyun's father, a member of the exam committee, had died on her father's operating table. Coincidentally, Ji's brilliant older sister had gone missing around the same time. To make things even stranger, the leaked test questions from the tutoring center matched exactly what Ji's older sister had written in her notes. So-hyun's father had traded the exam questions in exchange for getting his daughter transferred to the high school. Ji kept So-hyun by her side, using her as proof of her father's mistakes. To her, it was an entertaining game. But, just as So-hyun expected, Ji appeared to be indifferent, but in reality, she had another plan to expose her father. A few days later, So-hyun met with his senior and bluntly told him that she wouldn't make much money just by selling microphones. Instead, there was a much bigger opportunity, if he had the guts to take it. Using a bit of reverse psychology, So-hyun ignited his senior's greed. Without hesitation, he confessed that Jae had sold the college entrance exam questions at an exorbitant price to VIP clients, which included high-ranking politicians, business tycoons, and influential figures. Hearing this, his senior was thrilled and eagerly agreed to join the scheme. That very night, they collected advance payments from many parents. Finally, the day of the test arrived. As planned, the informant faked an injury. While receiving treatment, he discreetly slipped the exam questions into the nurse's pocket. However, at the last moment, the nurse unexpectedly turned on the plan. She grabbed a scalpel and stabbed him in the leg, then quickly lied to the supervisor, claiming that the patient had a rare blood condition and needed immediate bloodletting. Coincidentally, he had a rare blood type. If they didn't rush him to the hospital immediately, the patient's muscles and nerves would completely deteriorate. The exam proctors, unwilling to bear such a responsibility, seizing the opportunity while the blood transfusion was underway, she swiftly completed the necessary task, believing she had done so undetected. However, she was unaware that So-hyun and his senior had hijacked the ambulance. At that moment, Ji suddenly appeared, pleading with So-hyun to release her father. But having risked so much, So-hyun's senior refused to let the money slip away. Tension built between the two sides, reaching a deadlock. Then, in a shocking move, So-hyun grabbed the exam papers and swallowed them whole. Jae simply muttered, "I'm sorry," before injecting her with a muscle relaxant. The scene shifted. So-hyun's senior forced Ji to retrieve the questions from So-hyun's stomach, warning that if she didn't, the wealthy parents who had bought the exam answers would have him killed. Just then, her father, seemingly by accident, locked eyes with her, reminding her that So-hyun was her friend. Understanding the message, Jae agreed to perform the emergency surgery. But eventually, Ji successfully extracted the exam questions. As So-hyun's senior rushed out to deliver them, Ji turned to her father and asked if her sister had also been forced into this situation. Her father remained silent. Instead of answering, he tossed a red and white capsule onto the hospital bed. Inside was the real set of exam questions. In the next scene, Ji achieved the nation's only perfect score using the stolen test. When the television station interviewed her father about his successful parenting methods, standing before a live audience of tens of thousands, she held on to her sister and, without hesitation, jumped off a bridge in an apparent suicide. As the scandal grew, a leaked video exposed how her family had obtained the exam questions through surgery, causing public attention to shift toward the suspicious death of So-hyun's father. And Jae's father was finally arrested. Yet, when faced with a barrage of reporters' questions, he remained firm, stating that no matter what, he had to find his missing younger daughter. 6 months later, due to a lack of sufficient murder evidence, he was released from prison. Every day, he wandered near So-hyun's home, searching for something, and with that, the story came to an end. Thank you for your support and for following this journey.